When a new Resident Evil title drops, it's not just another release, it's a clear the calendar and binge it within a weekend type of deal for me. After spending this past weekend playing and beating Resident Evil Requiem or Resident Evil 9, I definitely do have a lot I want to talk about and say about the game. This isn't just another entry, it feels like it could be a big launching off point for the series going forward. First, let's talk about the scare factor. I've seen a lot of people comparing this to Resident Evil Village, and to me personally, I think this does lean into the horror aspects more than Village did. Village did have the moments like the baby crawling around the house creeping after you, or the doll portion of the game where you're in the house with the dolls. It leaned more into action than horror in my opinion. Of course, yes, it was still a horror game and there was horror elements, but I don't know, just to me it felt more action than it did horror. Requiem hits differently though, at least in my opinion. I think Grace's character really does a good job of helping aid it in feeling more like a horror game, and we will get to that in a second. But I think things like the orphanage sequence in the game with the babies hunting you was pretty creepy, and I did enjoy it. And honestly, I thought that it was one of those things where it left you more uneasy. You know, like I said, obviously you had the baby crawling after you in Village and the doll portion of Village that, you know, left me uneasy, but I don't know, this just hit different to me, you know. And I did legitimately think that the one baby was gonna get me while I was hiding behind the boxes. It was one of those moments where it definitely kind of gives you butterflies as you're thinking that you might actually get caught. And it really does capture that perfect note of dread where you're just like waiting and expecting to be caught by the babies. I really do think the character work in RE9 is great also. Playing as Leon is always a highlight, and it's always dope to see him back in one of these games. But I think Leon being canonically 51 years old now definitely adds a different aspect to this game, and I think really does kind of make you question things in terms of where the series goes going forward. And this really felt like, to me, this was kind of like a good send-off for him, or this was like his passing of the torch. And in terms of the other protagonists, we have Grace Ashcroft. Grace is actually the daughter of Alyssa Ashcroft from Resident Evil Outbreak, and I did really like that connection, and I did think it was a nice touch. And I thought Angela Sant'Albano, who voices Grace in this game, did an excellent job. One detail I loved was the constant stuttering from Grace.
How long was that?
I don't know. A while. Is anyone there? It's a deal.
It persisted throughout nearly the entire game and only faded in the final act. And personally, I thought it was a great visual and auditory representation of her character growth. Seeing a grief and trauma-riddled character grow and overcome immense odds was awesome to see. From a gameplay perspective, I played the game how it felt Capcom intended for it to be played, which was first person for Grace's segments and third person for Leon's. And personally, I do really think it gives you the best of both worlds, as I do enjoy the third person and the first person Resident Evil games, even though I do lean towards the third person ones more. But I did love 7 and 8, so I felt like it was probably good to scratch the itch of being able to play both a first person and a third person Resident Evil game. And I am going to probably play through this game once again on just third person, just to kind of see how much different the Grace segments do feel and just kind of how it changes up the gameplay experience for me. The flexibility to switch from the different camera angles though, I did think was very nice, you know, and just kind of choose how you want to play the game. And honestly, I'm really glad that they ended up, you know, adding that into Resident Evil Village after the release of that game as well. What surprised me the most and I thought was very good about this game was the emotional weight of the story. The themes of grief and trauma were handled very well and with a lot of maturity in my opinion. I did choose to release the Elpis in my first playthrough of the game, and while I did really enjoy that ending overall, I enjoyed the real final scene even more, and just seeing the photos of Claire taking care of Emily, which definitely mirrored how her mother looked after her, as we learned that Alyssa took her off of Gideon, and it's a beautiful cyclical bit of storytelling for sure. I was also really happy to see Sherry Birkin return. After Resident Evil 6, it did feel like Sherry kind of making an appearance and playing a pretty important part, just being on comms with Leon the whole time really gave her justice. In terms of the passing of the torch that I touched on earlier, while playing, I really felt they left the door open depending on how the game is perceived for Grace to be the new face of the franchise. And reception to the game honestly has been great. It was the highest rated game on Metacritic until Pokemon Pokopia overtook it, and maybe, you know, the Pokopia rating will change a little bit and it will be once again, you know, the #1 game. I'm talking about Resident Evil 9. But either way, I've seen a lot of talk about the game in my social media feeds, so it feels like a warm enough reception and welcome to Grace and the game overall, and just a really good indication that the game's beloved, it's selling well, and the fact that Angela Sant'Albano should be back in the near future voicing Grace. With Leon now being 51 canonically, like I said, I could definitely see Capcom maybe rotating protagonists in the games in the near future. Maybe RE10 follows Chris Redfield while RE11 will follow Grace, and then so on, you know, and it rotates. Maybe we do actually see Leon back, you know, in his 50s yet again, or maybe we get a prequel with Leon, you know, who knows. And I actually did expect a Chris cameo at the end of the game, and I did expect that to kind of help set up the next game, you know, when the helicopters come to save Grace and Leon, but Chris wasn't on one of the helicopters. So we'll see what happens going forward. But I think a lot of that does leave the door wide open for Capcom to kind of choose how they go going forward and just kind of do whatever they want with said characters. And maybe we even see Rose Winters from Resident Evil Village team up with Grace as well, who knows. But I do know that Capcom has a lot of avenues they could take the next game and just this series in general going forward. In terms of the rankings and the talk that I've seen online, I've seen a lot of people say this is a top 3 or a top 5 Resident Evil game. For me, the 3 that I played the most and went back to the most as a kid was the OG RE2, OG RE4, and then Code Veronica as well. As time's gone on though, my list probably looks something more like Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, you know, Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 4, the OG ones, you know, and then I would probably throw 7 in there and RE4 Remake because I did love that one a couple years ago. But I really might slip 9 in there now because I really did enjoy my time playing this game, and I'm excited to just, you know, go back into it and play it once again on my second and maybe even third playthrough soon. But like I said, it really does have a strong chance of landing in my top 5 if it's not there already. But what do you guys think though? Do you think that Grace has what it takes to be the new leader or the new lead protagonist for the series? How did you enjoy the game? Or if there's just anything else you want to talk about Resident Evil related, definitely let me know down in the comments section. If you enjoyed the video though, then I'd really appreciate it if you could give it a like, and also hit that subscribe button if you're new to the channel or returning to the channel and not subscribed, as I have a lot of really fun videos coming up related to upcoming or current gaming topics, JRPGs, and so much more. Thank you so much for watching though, and I am out.